Welcome back to another snorkeling adventure.
For the next 6 days, I'll be snorkeling, diving, and sailing the Azores. I'll be swimming with sharks, watching for dolphins and whales, and exploring underwater at the base of volcanic islands. This is one of the wildest parts of the Atlantic Ocean and may just be my greatest snorkeling adventure yet.
You know it's good when you want to dive in the marina.
Yeah, look at that viz. There it is.
It's a little bit bigger than my canoe and trolling motor setup.
Tomorrow first dive is Eagle Ray.
This is Bill in my room. This is home for the next 6 days. Our captain Paulo had a quick meeting to go over the schedule and map for the days ahead. And then Bill and I got busy prepping our camera gear for lots of underwater use. Oh my gosh, yeah. Awesome powers. Look, we can spy on Bill working on his camera stuff. My friend Bill got hired as a cinematographer for Earth Expeditions Travel. The trip was already planned, but they had a couple cancellations, and Bill pitched me coming as kind of a second shooter, and also mentioned the fact that I make snorkeling YouTube videos, and they said, if you can get here, we've got a spot for him on the boat. So basically, here I am. Literally 48 hours ago, I was in a swamp counting alligators. Super stoked, super grateful to be here. So good night, and we'll see you tomorrow for day number 1, Azores. Before we get any farther, where are the Azores and how do you actually say it? The Azores are a Portuguese archipelago made up of 9 volcanic islands that are pretty much smack dab in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean. As far as pronunciation goes, the correct native pronunciation is Azores. The American way of saying it is Azores, or Azores. And if you took 3 years of high school Spanish like me, then you say Azores for some reason, and henceforth I'm just gonna randomly use all 3. Bom dia. We've got 3 dives on the schedule. The first one, we're gonna sail the other side of this island and then start a little bit of scuba action. Here we go. Day number 1.
Not only this view, but some of the richest ocean in the world.
Yeah, that's pretty mind-blowing. Can't really have trouble processing this. Check out these caves. Oh man. Wow. Alright, so this is our first dive spot. We're starting out super chill, but it's time to suit up.
Crystal clear, and it's. You want to go there, check your equipment together, check the key. You have 5 steps.
I think this is the first time I've ever seen Bill use a selfie stick, but after he jumped in, we made some final gear adjustments and then sank our way down below. This was supposed to just be a chill check-in drift dive, so that Joao, our dive master, could gauge our skill levels. But it was immediately obvious that in the Azores, even the check-in dives are incredible. At the start, the sea cliffs sloped gently down to the bottom of the ocean and were completely covered with a layer of marine vegetation. The current was kind of interesting here. We were definitely getting pulled along, but the waves made everything pulse and sway back and forth while still carrying us forward. And of course, there were plenty of fish hanging out. Vibrant, ornate wrasses cruised by, as well as Mediterranean parrotfish. At 60 feet, everything was tinted blue, so hopefully you'll get a chance to see these colorful guys in shallower water. And we also saw what I think is a blacktail comber. Then we left the gentle slopes behind and came to some serious underwater cliffs. I felt the desire to be snorkeling in shallower water temporarily leave my body, as no way I'd be able to experience this abyssal ledge without a tank. And then a curious visitor approached me out of the blue gloom. This is a gray triggerfish. The ocean has some intense stuff in it, but as far as what I'm personally afraid of, these guys are near the top of the list. Why? They're brave, aggressive, and they eat underwater camera dome ports for breakfast. Thankfully, this guy decided to spare us all from biting and scratching my dome port on day 1 of the trip, and after flashing his belly at me a couple times, he went on his merry way. Once my heart rate returned to normal, I could get back to staring up at the underwater cliffs. If I didn't have to keep my regulator in, my mouth would have been open the whole time. In addition to calibrating our diving skills for the rest of the trip, this dive was a good introduction to the sheer magnitude of this marine ecosystem. I mean, yeah, obviously the Atlantic Ocean is low-key not small, but as someone who spends a lot of time in springs, creeks, and rivers, well, this was quite the increase in volume of water. And then way down below in the distance, we saw a ray cruising along. There was no way we could catch up to it, and by now we had reached our endpoint, but it was a good sign of the adventures that lie ahead. Following Joan's lead, we did our safety stop and slowly ascended our way back to the surface, where the boat was waiting for us.
Well, that was awesome. Still just kind of getting dialed in, so didn't do a whole lot besides drift along, but holy cow, those underwater cliffs. What a place. Triggerfish was sweet. Thankfully my dome port didn't get compromised. Dive 1 down. So much more to go. Oh man, and there's breakfast.
With the check-in dive out of the way, and since you're coming on this trip too, let me briefly introduce you to a few of the crew. First up, there's Bill. If you're subscribed to the channel, you know Bill. Then we have Ed, co-owner of Earth Expeditions and our trip leader. Also Tom, a native Azorean from the island of Faial, who's experiencing part of his home from the ocean for the first time. Then Joan, our dive master extraordinaire from mainland Portugal. And last but not least, Captain Paulo. Born and raised in the Azores, he knows this ocean like the back of his hand. Oh yeah, and there's me. My goal is to snorkel at least once every day of this trip. So far, so good.
Just eating breakfast and then I just look up that natural bridge. It's crazy. Like this is normal.
Joan held a pre-dive meeting, complete with original artwork, and went over what to expect on the dive ahead. The plan was to explore the base of the island and then swim directly through it, where Paulo would be waiting to pick us up on the far side.
All right, so Bill and Zhao are going to be diving, but I'm going to be snorkeling above them. And you might think that's crazy, because why would I snorkel when I have the equipment to dive? But I just really love snorkeling, and I think it'd be really cool to swim through the tunnel, hit the surface, and kind of really be able to fully experience the natural bridge. So that is my plan. That's what we're going to do. I do want to say I'm just going to be snorkeling because it's really dangerous to free dive after scuba diving. You have to wait at least like 12 hours. Just there's risks of decompression and gases, and blood, and all that. Just going to be snorkeling at the surface. That's fine. No free diving until tomorrow.
There's no way around it. This was the bluest water I have ever been in. Now that the sun was up, it was just a whole nother level of blue. I waved goodbye to Bill and Joan as they headed down, swam through their veil of bubbles, and kicked off to the rock island. I guess the guys on scuba alerted the welcoming committee because before I knew it, a large group of fish had come to say what's up. These are lesser amberjack. Just so we're clear, the lesser refers to them being the smallest of the amberjack species and does not reflect on their own self-worth or contributions to society. These guys range throughout the Atlantic, so it's kind of interesting to see a fish here that I could also find back home in Florida. I also spotted a feather drifting by in the water. Clearly this small islet was supporting a lot of life, both above and below the surface. I left the less than amberjacks behind me, located João and Bill, and then arrived at the base of the islet. I was surprised to find that the submerged base was pretty vibrantly white. The whitewashed walls stuck out in pretty extreme contrast to the intense blue of the surrounding ocean. The waves were surging up the sides of the rocks, but thankfully, this side of the islet was pretty well protected. But João had warned me that this wouldn't be the case on the far side. Hopefully by now you've learned that islands and islets aren't floating landmasses, but it was still wild to look down and see where the trunk of the rock erected from the seafloor. But lucky for me, along the numerous ledges and slopes was shallow water and loads of unfamiliar fishes. For starters, there were a handful of young white sea bream drifting about. And as for the submerged rock itself, not everything was a blank canvas. Plenty of areas were coated with dense, colorful life. I kind of wonder what a fish's concept of gravity is like, because every surface here, whether a vertical wall or an overhead ceiling, was a place to live. Oh, and I finally did get a few glimpses of some ornate wrasses in water shallow enough to not mute their crazy colors. It's a pretty stunning fish. I genuinely do not know what this is, but heck yeah, little dude. As I continued to snorkel the walls, I came across these red and black, miniature, easy to draw looking dragons. These are blennies, specifically red-lipped blennies, I believe. They were everywhere along the walls, but they were pretty wary of me, giving me a wild side eye as they kept their distance. But with a little patience, I was able to approach a few individuals. Apparently, they were very territorial. I missed it due to battling the waves, but this guy nearly got smoked by his neighbor. If there was a good crevice to hide in, they were there. Anyways, I'm a big fan of blennies now. Big fan. Huge. By this point, João and Bill were beginning to make their way to the bridge, and as I rounded the corner, there it was. I swam up the channel, and it looked like decades or centuries or whatever of pounding waves had cut right through, pretty much clear to the seabed. The waves were pretty intense coming through the main bridge, but if you remember from João's map, there was a second bridge that had a smaller passageway that zigzagged through the islet. As others scubaed down below, I made my way along the surface. As my eyes and camera readjusted to the sunlight on the far side, I saw Bill and João navigating a field of submerged boulders. Meanwhile, I navigated my own liquid obstacles at the surface while trying to take in the view of what we had just swam through. I spotted the boat, and before I got sent back into the rocks, battled my way back over to it. Oh, and get a load of this jellyfish I found below the sailboat. Look at that thing. Just straight up polka dots and jelly. Very cool.
Yep. Snorkeling was the move. That was top 5 snorkeling experiences all time. I left my wetsuit on so I'd be ready to snorkel at a moment's notice, but I haven't peed in so long. I gotta go so bad right now. So I've just been told that 70 years ago, this did not even exist. In 1957, there was an eruption, and oh, go ahead.
This is what sent me to America.
Right.
Literally.
That's
This earthquake. I was 2 years old when it happened.
You said that your village was covered in 8 feet of ash. Wow. Holy cow.
I can connect you with it.
Okay.
At least I'll keep us off the wall.
Since the kayak was inflatable and volcanic rock is pretty sharp, we were given specific instructions to protect the boat as best we could. Ed was kind enough to ensure that our weight belt anchor held, and I went off to quickly explore the sea arch. The water was clear, but certainly more hazy in this spot. I didn't see a lot of life in the area, but I didn't really care because, just look at the setting. It all looked pretty precarious and ominous, just so much rock looming overhead. Kind of makes you wonder how often big chunks fall off. I don't think I've ever looked up so much while snorkeling before. But eventually, I assumed the more traditional horizontal snorkeling position and checked out the substrate back by the kayak. Not that it should have surprised me, but the floor was covered in red volcanic rock. Call me crazy, get excited about substrate, but I've never snorkeled over a bed of lava rock. And the various shades of reds, oranges, purples, and pinks was just something else. Satisfied with this cove, we loaded up and struck off to the red beach that we had spied from the boat.
Yeah. Well, I've never been to a red beach before, but I made it to one. That's like I'm on Mars or something. It's a rock. Or sand. It's just like micro garden landscaping lava rock. And pretty fresh too, because this wasn't here 70 years ago, which is so crazy. Oh, look. Over here, it's like a jellyfish came up here. Did not survive, but they're up and coming down. Going this way. Alright, it's time for me to leave, because look at all those rocks coming down.
don't know if you can see that. Except that my fins are over there, so I've got to get my fins back. I guess on the plus side, lava rock is not very heavy, but I don't want to get hit by anything, so. Alright, coast is clear. I'm gonna run for the fins. In 3, 2, 1. Alright, we got it. I think some pebbles actually, whoa, big wave. May have hit me, but good. Operation back to the kayak source now.
Down in the middle.
A little bit more of an adventure than I was thinking it would be.
Man, I don't know how big some of those were that came down the middle, but they looked almost this size. That popped right in the middle, did you?
Yeah, that would have been bad. Yeah. Or I would have felt it for sure. Yeah. Most mountains don't shed this many rocks because they're not this young.
Right.
So this one is just getting rid of all the extra
I don't
fluff.
know if I've ever seen that before.
Yeah, that's really wild.
Not as graceful that time, but it made it.
Well, now I can say I've been to a red beach, but got a lot of rocks in my shoes.
I've never experienced something like this before in real life. I will say I'm pretty sure I found a place that looked just like this in Minecraft, but this is obviously way better.
Fish, dolphins. No?
No?
Oh, the birds were there a second ago.
I was gonna have to put my wetsuit back on, which would not be a problem.
Okay, we're just excited.
Some kind of action going on out there.
It's right there. No way. Let's go. Dude. Whoa. You can hear them. They're so loud.
Yeah. We asked Captain Paulo if there was a chance to see the dolphins underwater. In the Azores, you can be in the water with specific species of wild dolphins, but the animals have to define the interaction. Essentially, we could swing wide, cruise ahead of the pod, enter the water, and just wait and hope that they chose to swim by us. It's ultimately up to the dolphins. Paulo said, let's give it a shot, so we scrambled to get prepped and waited for his signal.
We good?
The frigid water could have taken my breath away, but there was no time to feel it. Bill and I got our bearings and swam into position as quickly as we could. Also frantically dialed in my camera settings, because we knew very well that we may not get a second chance at this. And then boom, it happened. The ocean was filled with a deafening cacophony of clicks, whistles, and groans as the pod of common dolphins came blasting by in groups. At first they were right at our level, and then another group passed by way down below us. And then, one final large group came whistling by. As they hurtled off into the distant blue, their trailing bubbles reached us at the surface, and then Bill and I lost it.
Please tell me you got that. Yes, I did.
That's for the sharks, I guess. Yum. This is literally Plankton's house. 2 of them. Dang it, I'm pooping and I can hear dolphins outside the boat. It's a classic dolphin poop situation. Terrible. I'm not too late. There they are. Wow. We had 45 nautical miles of ocean to cover before we reached our next destination, an offshore seamount. So we spent much of the journey with our eyeballs peeled and glued to the horizon, looking for, well, really anything, but whales were up at the top of the list. After maybe an hour of searching, Bill spotted a faint puff of water way in the distance, a sperm whale. Spend about 15 minutes on the surface, and then we'll dive for like 45 minutes. These are the ones that eat the giant squid, right? Yeah. So they dive deep. Really deep. You tell whales apart by their spout, right?
Yeah.
Like. Another one wanna go up 200 meters. I'm about to go. There it is! Oh, here we go! That's amazing.
Yeah, this.
I got that guarantee.
And the other one is quite close now.
Sperm whales, their spout shoots off to the side. You can see the angle, and then, oh wow, you can see the like huge, like calm spot in the water where the tail was. That's crazy. But yeah, so like if it's a huge spout, then that rules out smaller whales and kind of narrows it down to bigger whales. So spout is how you can identify what whale species it is, because you can't really see a whole lot of them from the surface. But that tail was so cool. I haven't even gotten in the water yet today. Still off to such an amazing start. That's my first whale I've ever seen.
Really?
Never seen a whale before.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome, man.
That's awesome. Then it was time for another pre-dive meeting to prep for the shark dive. João and Paulo gave an extensive safety brief about how to interact with the animals, and honestly, just by the way they talked about the sharks, you could tell how much they respected and cared for these creatures. They emphasized the importance of eye contact, which will kind of be important later.
Eye contact all the time is important, okay?
The chum buoy was deployed, and then began the long wait. So it looks like we were just out in the middle of the ocean, which we are, but there's a seamount down below us. It's about 167 meters, which is technically shallow for as far out as we are, and apparently this is a great place to see blue sharks. So Paulo would throw in one piece of chum at a time, repeating as soon as it sank out of sight. Basically, the idea is the sharks will Pac-Man their way up to the surface. You never know how long it will take, or if anyone will even come. We've been waiting for like almost an hour and a half, and finally one shark has come up. It's a little bit shy, and they say it's a little small, but it's like over 2 meters, which is plenty big to me. But I think we're gonna suit up and see if we can check it out underwater. My head was on the swivel as soon as I entered the water. I'm no stranger to toothed aquatic wildlife, but my shark experience is kind of limited other than black tips and nurse sharks. I made my way to the end of the safety line, separate from the chum buoy, obviously, that Paulo had deployed, and waited once again. The water was that same royal blue, but this time it seemed to go on forever. Despite spectacular visibility, there was no bottom in sight. And then, a shape slowly began to materialize within that blue void. The blue shark. This shark was laser focused on food and methodically swam about, absolutely deleting bits of chum. It was just straight up gulping it down. You know they've got to have one heck of a metabolism. Sharks seemed to gain some confidence and ended up taking some pretty close passes. Not that I could really avoid looking deep into those bugged out eyeballs as it passed by, but I felt like I could see the intelligence. There was curiosity and intention behind its movements as it circled about, alternating between investigation and feeding. And then another shark entered the picture. A blue shark in a literal ocean of blue was already kind of hard to keep track of. Suddenly, that became twice as hard. And at the same time, I realized I wasn't enjoying myself as much as I typically would, which was really confusing to me. But as I bobbed about at the surface and the rhythmic rocking of the waves swirled my insides, it dawned on me what was happening. How's my nausea, you ask? Dog, it was full blown. Meanwhile, there are two 8-foot sharks having a grand time just zooting about, coming in from what I felt like was everywhere all at once. So at this point, maintaining eye contact became extremely difficult, and I was also forgetting to keep my hands close to my body, so I started to make my way back to the boat. Warning, you might want to skip ahead 10 seconds if you don't want to see some used oatmeal and watermelon. Anyways, you've been warned. After I made my own contributions to the chum, I felt better and was ready to get back at it, but then I threw up a second time, so I had to call a timeout. Eventually, I rallied and hopped back in. Now that they had watched us for a while, Paulo and João allowed Bill and I to throw on a weight belt so we could dive a little bit deeper with the sharks. This ended up helping the seasickness problem a lot, as I wasn't just stuck bobbing about on the surface so much. I grabbed a breath and dove down, head still on a swivel. Before long, one of the sharks returned out of the infinite blue. It was pretty surreal being suspended in this bottomless world with such a graceful and powerful animal. Blue sharks are so named for the blue color along their back and sides. It's kind of hard to tell it apart from all the other blue in this environment, but they are in fact blue, and that's kind of the point. It's perfect camouflage for a predator that hunts in the open ocean. Their hydrodynamic form and extra long pectoral fins enable them to travel great distances with ease. When they want to be, they're also one of the fastest sharks on the planet. They eat a lot of smaller fish species and a few invertebrates like squid and octopus. And although they are near the top of the food chain, they aren't without predators themselves. Gotta watch out for orcas and mako sharks. And of course, death by bycatch from commercial fisheries and illegal poaching. I noticed some long string-like attachments clinging to one of the sharks. These are parasitic copepods, tiny crustaceans commonly found on blue sharks. On one final pass, one of the sharks gently bumped into my dome port before rebounding in the other direction. All I'm saying is if that had been a triggerfish, my camera housing probably would have been torn to shreds. But then it was time to say farewell to the sharks, and I also needed to factory reset my tummy.
That was awesome, but being seasick in the sea with a lot of sharks is not ideal, but it worked out. So I'm gonna look at the horizon for a little bit.
I ate a lot of raw ginger.
Are you gonna put you throwing up in your video?
I went to bed and totally passed out, but when I woke up, it was already time for another pre-dive meeting as we were finally nearing the end of our 45 nautical mile trek out into the Atlantic.
All right, we just got to the place. We're actually going to be staying here tonight. We're pretty much way out in the middle. You can still see land, but it's really far in the distance over
over that way. Yeah, over there. We're hoping we can see some Azores mobula rays, species of devil ray. They're supposed to be really big. Hopefully not get sick this time, but no promises. Here we go.
Even though we were way offshore, this was a pretty big seamount. Basically, 100 feet below us was the top of a submerged 8,000 feet volcano. Although this was shallower than where we dove with the sharks, the bottom was still just out of sight. And being so isolated out here, the ocean somehow just felt all that much bigger. Paulo had a specific hole that he liked to drop the anchor in, so Bill and João threw on scuba gear to drop down to the seamount to make sure it was secured. I later learned that Paulo had managed to drop the anchor 10 feet off from the hole, which is some seriously mad skill. But anyways, they disappeared below me, trailing behind that classic wall of bubbles, which I found to be nicely mesmerizing. The activity had alerted a large school of lesser amberjacks who came over to investigate me. When we were diving with the sharks, there was nothing else in the ocean other than the sharks to see. In contrast, this place was teeming with life. In fact, it was just officially made a marine protection area in 2025. It was wild to be in the open ocean and yet still surrounded by so much life, all thanks to the submerged volcano down below. And the lesser amberjacks weren't the only residents to be seen, as a massive school of bonito passed beneath me. There are also a few larger greater amberjacks hanging out closer to the bottom, but they're a bit out of reach for my freediving abilities. With golden hour beginning to hit the surface, I was content to drift with the lesser of the two amberjack species. In name and size only, of course. But then, I noticed Bill way down below locked in on something way out in the distance, and before I knew it, two enormous rays materialized out of the blue. These are sicklefin devil rays. Their wingspan was every bit of 6 feet, and some individuals can get up to twice that size. Pretty impressive for something that eats small fish and plankton. These pelagic rays range throughout the world's oceans, but they are critically endangered. Some of the largest gatherings of this species happens right here in the Azores, as the rays migrate to the region as the waters warm in the summer. The pair circled us for a bit and then vanished, but suddenly a whole fever of rays came cruising through. Many of the rays had a handful of hitchhiking remors in tow. I suppose there are worse survival strategies than a lifelong Uber through the ocean, but either way, the rays didn't seem fazed by their passengers. The longer we waited, more and more rays began to appear, until I found myself staring up at 20 individuals. Let's be real, this is a crazy-shaped animal, but for a 750-pound flying pancake, they soared through the water with remarkable grace and speed. And then an even bigger fever of over 30 rays appeared. It's hard to explain the feeling of floating in the ocean while being orbited by dozens of giant devil rays, but I do know I'll carry this moment with me until I die. There was one more scuba dive planned for the evening, and being satisfied with the day's snorkeling and freediving, I opted to tag along. It was a pretty simple dive, just follow the anchor line 50 feet down and see what comes cruising by. My camera battery died immediately on the way down, so it was up to the action camera to document the dive. And yeah, we pretty much just went down and chilled, literally and metaphorically, with water temps hovering around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. It gets cold pretty quickly when you're still. We didn't see much for a while, but before the end of our dive, the fever of rays appeared for one final flyby, as the sun began to set and the royal blue waters turned navy.
Pretty good sunset. I'm just gonna get even better too. Hot take, but the free diving and snorkeling was way more fun than the scuba diving. Just saying. Plus, I didn't get cold. I got so cold down there scuba diving. But still cold though.
Good morning and welcome to day number 3, 45 kilometers out in the middle of nowhere. All right, so we're getting in with the Mobulas. They just came back this morning, well after sunrise. There's another tour boat here, but they're having trouble anchoring because Captain Paulo is a master with the anchor. So we're all set. Bill and Jean are already doing a deep bottom dive. It's an advanced scuba, but I'm gonna get back in, do some free diving and snorkeling with some of the Mobulas.
Just come out, they take this off.
As you can see, it's a lot. Putting this on and off every day, but small price to pay for snorkeling here. Paulo had said that the rays always visit the back of the boat in the morning, and boy was he spot on. I wasn't sure I'd be able to top yesterday's sunset free dive, but no way was I going to pass up a chance to snorkel with the rays again. First off, however, I found this squiggling thing. No clue what it was, but I could tell it was some kind of creature because of the way that it was. It wasn't long before I got to see another ray. I should mention that these rays are in the Mobula ray group, which is a broad category for pelagic rays, or rays that live in the open ocean. This is in contrast to stingrays, which live on the seafloor. On the boat, we just refer to them as Mobulas. A new sighting for the morning was a huge school of yellowmouth barracuda. This time, I was actually able to dive down and get level with them. And then what better way to end our time offshore than with one last giant fever of rays. Although these rays were hanging out relatively close to the surface, scientists have recently documented them diving as deep as 6,000 feet. The physiology required to withstand that amount of pressure and temperature change is wild. So yeah, these big softies are pretty hardcore. But it was finally time for us to wrap up and begin the long course back to land in the island of Pico.
All right, let me give you a tour. We are down here and in here. Bill sleeps over there. I sleep over here. There is pretty much camera gear all over the place. Most of it's Bill's. Also check out my nice skinny little blanket. We also have a bathroom in here. There's a toilet, sink, and shower. You have to push this button to drain the shower periodically so it doesn't overflow. We do have hot water though, so I mean, that's pretty awesome. And then for the toilet, there are a lot of instructions for the toilet. Let me walk you through how complicated the toilet process is. So, say you've already dropped the kids off at the pool.
This one agitates the contents. This fills the pool with water, and this drains it. So you've got to agitate this, make sure that their water is all the way full, and then drain it. Then you got to do it 3 more times after the contents are down the drain, because you really don't want any clogs. There's another bedroom off to that side, and then there's one over here, one over around the corner on the other side. And then there's actually another bedroom in that hatch over there, and bathroom over there that Paulo uses when the boat's full. This is the common area and kitchen. We actually don't hang out here too much. Most of the time we're hanging out here. That's where we eat most of our meals. That's our dive rack here. And then all the dive stuff is out on the back of the boat. That's the dinghy, which I haven't actually ridden in that yet. And then you come up top here. This is captain's area, and we hang out up here a lot. And then also right here below the sail. The winds finally picked up enough to justify throwing up the sails, so Paulo let us help raise the mainsail, and despite 0 qualifications and really just cranking a knob, I still totally felt like a pirate.
This one? Yeah? Oh. No,
You do both.
Yeah. Oh, you what? How's that?
Isn't that cool?
No black pearl, she'll do. How far is the Grand Line from here? Apparently we can do 12 knots with the sails up, so pretty good. Moving along. We still got the engines on right now, but wind powers is also a helpful bonus. It was a really long boat ride, so we had a lot of time to kill.
Better than nothing.
Finally, we made it to Pico. So we got word that apparently there's some orcas ahead, 2 orcas. We're in a channel between a couple of islands that's about 1,000 meters deep. It's a great place to see marine mammals. We're like a couple miles out from where they're supposed to be, and they only come through this area about once a year, so this is super special. So hopefully we get a chance to see them.
Oh, off to the right? Oh, that's
We just saw orcas.
They stay at 12:30. Wow! What a big fin!
And beaked whales.
Oh, we should have those big whales. Yeah.
Oh!
My gosh, look at that.
Out by the group of birds, you can just see the orcas dorking. Well, excuse me, apparently there are 5 orcas. But as it turns out, we were still wrong. It was a pod of 11 orcas. Whoa, you can see his face! Oh, man! Whoa! Wow. We watched the orcas for a while, but eventually it was time to cut across the channel and make our way to the cliffs along the island of São Gorge. Bill had gotten so excited seeing the orcas that he kept hitting his head on the boom. It happened so many times that the crew actually gave him a helmet. Honestly, I think they may have been just trying to protect the boom. Holy cow. What a coastline. Oh, it goes through, no way. What? Look at the veins running through the side of the mountain. This was by far the most mind-boggling stretch of coastline my eyeballs have ever seen. And of course, the water was crystal clear.
First week backdrop for a wetsuit application.
Despite a tight schedule due to a pre-planned event for that evening, I was given about 20 minutes to snorkel, and I wasted no time suiting up. I've been privileged to snorkel in some pretty beautiful places, but I'm not sure anything beats this. São Gorge towered overhead, and just every direction was glorious. Beneath the surface, the perimeter of the island was characterized by large boulders, haphazardly stacked and scattered about, clearly shed from the cliffs above. The farther from land I went, the smaller the boulders became, until eventually the rocky seabed sloped downward and was swallowed up in blue. And of course, there were also plenty of fish. Huge schools of tiny fish drifted about, and I caught a glimpse of a male Mediterranean parrotfish. They're all gray compared to the red and yellow females that I saw earlier. And I also spotted a few more ornate wrasses, who were as oversaturated as always. I could have snorkeled here for hours and hours, but even a few minutes spent in this peculiar wilderness was such an incredible gift.
That's short and sweet, but holy cow, what a place. Wow.
For dinner, we had some limpets that Joan harvested in a traditional Azorean meal called alcatra, which was like a beef stew, and then finished out day 4 back in the harbor at Pico. Ed and I woke up before sunrise and headed off to climb the volcano that had been looming over us the entire trip.
A little bit of a side quest. There's a excursion to go and climb Mount Pico, which is pretty cool because it's a volcano we've been looking up at the whole time, which I know it's not snorkeling, but figured since the ecological theme of this whole trip has really been volcano, this would be a good thing to experience. So I'm gonna climb this mountain real quick. I'll show you the view from the top, and then hopefully we'll get back down to the boat and get to do some more snorkeling. Let's look at all the mini volcanoes scattered across the base of the major volcano. See those 2 rocks way out there? Right there. That's where we snorkeled on the first day. That's crazy. Got a ways to go.
It was just 2.5 miles to the top, but almost 3,500 feet of elevation gain.
Crater Peak. We do be up here. We're totally surrounded by ocean. And I think that straight that way is Antarctica.
Two, one.
As promised, here's the view from the top. Man, crystal clear skies. I sure hope that weather lasts for the hike down.
It may not be snorkeling, but it's not every day I get to climb an active volcano.
No, non posso tocar porque já tenho um
Well, now we're hiking down through a cloud, so this has technically become a water-based activity. I do like these shrubs.
A little waterlogged, we headed back down the mountain and immediately set sail once again.
Thank goodness that volcanic rock is super grippy, because otherwise we would have slipped and died like a million times on the way down. I just found this the other day, but
apparently you can see the ocean and the bottom of the catamaran from here. So that is pretty cool. I guess it looks extra blue because of the white hull reflecting, but I mean, it really is that blue. It really is that blue. But yeah, that's pretty sweet. The plan for the next 24 hours was awesome. We were going to a secret cove back on the epic coastline of São Gorge where I planned to do a night dive, and in the morning we'd go visit a waterfall where I was going to try and find the island's only native freshwater fish, the European eel. The weather was looking pretty rough, but Paulo said he thought we could make it. But time would tell.
That's where we snorkeled yesterday for like 15 minutes.
Whoa, two! There's two more! There's so many sharks! Apparently all of them are hammerheads. Just keep sailing by. Yeah, I can see the hammer. Barely. It's super big.
I wonder what species they are.
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is scalloped and greater, right?
Yeah, there's more than that though.
Yeah.
Look at us, we're the hammerhead sharks along that.
It's freaking freezing, Mr. Bigglesworth.
Where's that from?
It's from Austin Powers.
Oh, of course. Everything.
All your quotes are Austin Powers. It seems kind of crazy that you can't see any waterfalls forming just from all the runoff from the rainfall. But our mountain guide, Juan, when we were climbing Mount Pico this morning, he was saying that the volcanic rock is just so porous that water just gets absorbed and disappears, and that there's really not that much runoff from these mountains. It's pretty wild, but hopefully, as Paulo said, there'll be a nice waterfall where we're headed, but I don't know. Still, it's crazy to see all these huge cliffs and no water coming down them.
Unfortunately, the weather began to get worse. Paulo was constantly checking our route, monitoring the weather, and doing what he could to get us to the secret cove. But unfortunately, the ocean said no, and Paulo made the safe call to turn around and head back to Pico. However, we still had to cross the channel between São Gorge and Pico, which had now become a very angry washing machine. Bill and Ed were totally down for the count. Tom and I sought refuge on the back of the boat, where we could at least get a fresh breeze and see the horizon, so long as we held on tight and didn't get launched out into the ocean. Somehow, our stomachs survived. Captain Paulo brought us safely back to harbor in Pico.
Alright, well, you make plans and plans change, but it's not the end of the day yet. Park the boat near a little marina, and there's a public swim area close by, so we're gonna get in, do a little night snorkel, just using the top of the wetsuit tonight because I'm gonna keep the bottoms dry for the trip back. But I don't really know what I'm gonna find. It's also raining, but we'll see how this goes.
It's gonna be cold on the Legos.
Thought I'd be able to see the bottom when I got off the boat, but I totally couldn't, and things felt scary real quick. The entire swim to shore, I had to keep telling myself that I had literally seen kids swimming there last night, but it's still hard to shake the idea of your flashlight suddenly illuminating a creature 3 times or 10 times your size. Thankfully, the lights of the harbor were pretty cheery. Before too long, my dive light was finally bouncing off the bottom of the harbor. First off, this tiny fish took the spotlight. I do not know who he is, but you gotta respect the confidence. As I entered the shallows, my flashlight revealed colors in the rock that weren't so obvious in the sunlight. There was a surprising amount of pink and green. Impressively camouflaged, even in plain sight on the boulder, was this punk rock little dude, a young scorpion fish. If their camouflage fails them, these fish have venomous dorsal spines to protect them from any predators that are foolish enough to have a go at them. The potency of the venom depends on the species, but some can be quite lethal. Eventually, this fellow conceded that his cover was indeed blown, and he slipped down and over the side of the rock. I continued on with my search, and it wasn't long before a flash of vibrant color caught my eye. It was the brightest red starfish I've ever seen. Clearly, Patrick needs a higher SPF sunscreen. I believe these are actually purple sea stars, which clearly this one is red, but they come in a variety of shades. Not far away, I spotted this guy, which was a little closer to purple, but still red. But these were some pretty big starfish. Here's my hand for reference. I was about ready to make the spooky swim back to the boat when I hit the double jackpot with two new species. A midnight blue Azores damselfish and a bright red cardinalfish were both tucked away in a corner at the base of a large rock. I don't know that these guys typically hang out together, but it was pretty crazy to suddenly see that explosion of color illuminated in the dark. But by now, it was almost midnight, and between the volcano, the storm, and the snorkel, I was pooped. So I zoomed back across the void to the boat.
Well, that was short and sweet, but in my opinion, definitely still worth it. Those starfish are super cool. Not to mention, got a better look at those three fish species, which one of them I've seen before, the other two I hadn't seen before. Sure, I ID'd them in the voiceover, but I currently have no idea what they are. Nice, cheeky little night snorkel. You never know what adventure will befall you in the Azores. So I'll see you guys tomorrow for day number 6. The really nice thing about freshwater is you don't have to rinse your gear afterwards. But in saltwater, if you let the saltwater sit on your gear, it's going to corrode it and rust really bad. It's super bad for gear. So thankfully, Paulo has this nice handy dandy freshwater spray nozzle that's been saving Bill and my gear the whole trip. So I'm gonna give everything a thorough rinse down so it doesn't get all rusty and flip out on me later. I'm gonna go to bed. Unfortunately, I didn't get to use this piece of gear due to the rain, but I was prepared.
By the time the ocean calmed down on day 6, we only had enough time to slowly make our way back to Faial before I needed to be at the airport. So along the way, we kept our eyes peeled for wildlife. We finally got a good view of a hammerhead shark, which now we believe were smooth hammerheads.
Oh, we just turned. Wow! That's awesome.
As the clouds rolled back in, we reached the east coast of Faial. It was nearly time to sail for the airport, but my request for a final snorkel was granted, and I jumped in one last time. As I kicked about below yet another mind-blowing coastline, weirdly enough, I found myself thinking about backyards. It's wild to think that Tom and Paulo both grew up with this blue world behind their homes. Over the last 6 days, some of the places that I snorkeled and stared both up and down at were easily the most beautiful I've ever experienced. But despite the mind-blowing grandeur of this place, I still found myself missing my own backyard, which, as I live in Florida, is mostly a swamp. As long as violence and want aren't a factor, I'm not sure that one backyard is really better than another. They're just different. After all, it is that very difference in diversity that makes the world the one-of-a-kind place that it is. And as I floated there between the island and the boat, one aspect of the magic of the Azores clicked for me. This place doesn't simply boast itself, but it also hits you over the head with the truth that the world is full of really cool backyards. Each of these backyards all come with their own set of challenges, threats, and wonders, but they are all still worthy of knowing and protecting. And I will forever be grateful to Paulo and the SailDive crew for showing us around theirs.
Just made it back to the harbor here at Horta. Got to catch my flight back to the US. Just want to give a huge thank you to Captain Paulo and the crew with SailDive for sharing their home with us and keeping us safe on this incredible adventure. And then also thank you to Earth Expeditions for inviting me out here for this truly amazing experience. The Azores are truly a magical place. And then, of course, last but not least, shout out to my friend Bill, who pitched me as his backup cameraman for this trip. This has been one heck of a snorkeling adventure. If you're interested in having an amazing travel experience just like this one, then definitely check out Earth Expeditions. They have some awesome trips planned to really unique and amazing parts of the world. Definitely worth looking into. As always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this snorkeling adventure out in the middle of the Atlantic, and I'll see you guys next time.